Hey friends, my name's Stevie Taylor. Welcome to the Gig Life Podcast. My guest today is Dave Goodman. Dave is a drummer and educator from Sydney. We caught up at his studio on Halloween night, which was a little bit spooky and some strange things sort of went on, but that's all good. Dave recently changed his technique, his drumming technique, due to some pain he was getting in his hand. It was fascinating to hear how he went about that. Of course, we talked about his career and just music in general and philosophies and extremely intelligent man. I hope you enjoyed it. I did. Ladies and gentlemen, Dave Goodman. Cheers. I think we're rolling. Dave Goodman.
Hi.
How are you, man?
Yeah, I'm well.
Happy Halloween.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny, man, because you knocked on my door and I thought it was one of those kids trick-or-treating.
Yeah.
Like, get off my porch.
No, you would ask for a trick. Yeah.
Thanks, Steve.
So we were talking just before we started rolling, the significance of Halloween.
Yeah.
So,
Well, for me, I mean,
Yep.
it's my sister's 20th wedding anniversary today.
Yep.
And that brings with it this whole other backstory, which I've been thinking about. Like, of course, thinking about her and her family. But also it came at a really interesting time in my, if you want to call it a career.
Yeah.
So there were a couple of days. Let's see. It was a Saturday. So 20 years ago, I believe the 31st was a Saturday, and she got married in Tamworth, which is where I was born and grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a flight booked to go up there. I guess probably on the Friday. I must have gone up Friday, and Saturday morning wedding, and then I think come back Sunday morning. Well, on the Thursday before that, 29th, I got a phone call, and I was at home with my flatmates, who at the time were the great pianist Matt McGann. Mm-hmm. And lovely bassist Mervyn Sequeira. We were like a house trio for many, many years, living in Hill Street, Leichhardt, in this place that was falling down. And the phone rang Thursday morning, and I was still a student at the con. It was like maybe my second last week of classes after 4 years, and I was going to graduate later that year. And I had a big band rehearsal to get to that afternoon. Anyway, the phone rang. And it was Bernie McGann, the great alto saxophone player, sort of Australian jazz icon. He's never made a phone call to my house before. Oh, Dave, it's Bernie. I hope that's a good enough version. It's been a while since I've heard his voice.
Yeah.
It's Bernie. What are you doing in the next 3 weeks? I said, oh, well, Bernie, I've got my final recital at the con, oh, that's too bad, mate. There's a tour I want you to do. Pochet's sick, and and I'm like, oh no, I'm sorry, and I'm thinking, 4 years. I'm an idiot for a start, like for thinking this way. But I can't do this tour. I didn't know what the tour was. Anyway, so I hung up the phone, and Matt was sitting there listening, and he said, that was Bernie? And I said, yeah. And he said, what do you want? And I said, oh, there's like a tour for 3 weeks, over the next 3 weeks, but I got my recital at the con. He said, man, call him back and tell him to do the gig, reschedule the recital. And I'm like, oh, of course, yeah. Oh, what a fool. So I called him straight away and I said, hey, Bernie, it's Dave. Listen, look, I'll call the con, I'll work that out, and I instantly formed a thought in my head, even if I have to, like, absent fail that exam or whatever and even not get my degree, I'd be willing to put that on the line for whatever Bernie McGann has to offer, right? So he said, oh, okay, well, have you got a passport? And I hadn't been out of the country yet, so I said, no. And he said, oh, well, you can't come then, mate. And I said, well, what is it? And he said, well, 10 Part Invention were touring Southeast Asia for 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. Something like, I think it was 21 concerts in 21 days. It was nuts. And I said, geez, and I hung up the phone again, and Matt said, was that about a passport? Like, he's eavesdropping on the conversation. And was that about a passport? And I said, yeah. And he said, oh, man, you can get that rushed through. You don't worry about it, And I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't even know. Okay, so I called Bernie back and said, hey, man, look, just give me a few hours, leave it with me. I'll do my best. So he said, okay, mate, but, we've got to get it cracking because the flights are on Tuesday.
Hey.
And the first gig's on Sunday at the Opera House, oh God. And I'm like, but my sister's wedding's on Saturday in Tamworth, and I'm like, I think, anyway, so I got on the phone and, this is back in the days before anyone was using the internet for this kind of stuff.
Yep.
So fortunately, living in Sydney, it was all this bureaucratic nonsense of having to get a letter faxed. From Melbourne, from the promoter, and to confirm that I was actually working and that I needed not only visas for China but a passport, and had to take cash and go to the chemist and get passport photos and go right into Pitt Street and hand this all over at the desk, and then they like courier the passport to you according to when you have to depart, So people can get them apparently a lot quicker.
Yeah.
But I went in there on Friday and I did it, and mine arrived on Monday afternoon for a Tuesday morning flight.
Oh, wow.
So meantime, I got all of that, scrambled for all of that, went into the con in the afternoon, and the guy running the big band, Dick Montz, was, the head of the course at the time. And I said, Dick, look, this tour has come up. And I had made up my mind. I didn't really care what he was going to say. I'm going to have to postpone my recital. And he said no. Oh, well, I guess I'm just going to have to fail my course, you can't turn down a 3-week tour with 10 Part Invention.
Yep.
So anyway, long story, to cut a long story short, I hate it when people cut that phrase short, long story short. It should be to cut a long story short. Yeah. Don't cut the phrase short.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyway.
Kind of doesn't work.
So I ended up having to go to the dean, and I said, look, this tour has come up and I have to postpone my recital. I think she was filing her nails, and she looked up at me and she said, well, that'll be a wonderful start to your career, won't it? So I got her blessing, and she let me change the recital.
Yep.
Yeah, so then I got on the plane and I flew to Tamworth for my sister's wedding, got really drunk that night, and then flew back to Sydney and sight read the 10 Part Invention gig at the Opera House.
Wow.
Which was nuts, because all these crazy pieces by Roger Frampton, and anyway, and then I had a day to kind of get the passport sorted and just get some luggage and stuff, and just, I mean, I had no idea what I was in for, man. Like, then Tuesday morning, we got to the airport, jumped on the plane, off we went, and first gig was in Taiwan. And we sort of went the length of Taiwan and played. They were all national concert halls, 2,000 or 3,000 seat venues. I had never played in rooms like this before.
It sounded fantastic.
Oh, it was unbelievable. Like, except the drums were pretty crappy.
Oh yeah.
No, I just travelled with a snare and a pack and roll case with pedals and stuff.
Yep.
And cymbals, but the rest of it was provided, and but there were a few things that happened on that trip which were fascinating for me. I mean, just like, life curve.
First tour, right?
I had
tour ever.
Well, I had flown to Brisbane with Sandy Evans prior to that. That was the first time I caught a plane.
Oh, yes, yeah.
But my first trip overseas, absolutely. Yep. And I mean, I had shows you how ignorant I am of worldly things. It didn't occur to me that I was going to cross the equator and go into the northern hemisphere, and that in Beijing it was going to be snowing at this time. I packed all summer clothes.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And
how long ago was this? This is 20 years ago.
Yeah, so I was 21.
Yep.
And absolutely green, very wet behind the ears.
Yeah.
And I mean, I wouldn't have even known if my ass was on fire. I mean, I still don't know, but I mean, I really wouldn't have known then,
Yeah.
I just asked my wife. Anyway, so I mean, it was just unbelievable. It was like rock star service, right? The flights were amazing, and all the ground transport and everything was all just seamless. And anyway, we started playing all these concerts, and by about the third or fourth night, I'd kind of memorized the book, so I could just sort of finally play with these guys. And then I heard that when we get to China, we're playing for the Beijing International Jazz Festival, and which actually operated in several different cities concurrently, and the first gig was going to be in Shanghai, where we were going to open for the Dave Quartet from America, and I'm like, oh my god, Dave Holland was my biggest hero at the time, and it was surreal to me. And then in Beijing, we were supposed to open for Paul Motion's electric bebop band, and I couldn't believe it, these names. So China's getting closer and closer. We spent a week in the Philippines, and then and it was really funny. Like, we got to the venue in Shanghai, and it was very much like the old concert hall, the old Verbruggen Hall in what was the Con before it got renovated. I used to refer to it as the hallowed halls.
Right.
Now it's the hallowed hole.
Yeah.
It's all underground now. I mean, the Verbruggen Hall was totally different. And Craig Scott, the chair of the department, used to joke that Verbruggen was German for shit sound.
And was it?
Oh,
yeah.
Well, it was somebody's name, but I mean, it certainly didn't sound very. Yeah, it wasn't like a jazz type theatre to play in. It was very, very much set up for, I don't know, opera or chamber groups and stuff. So very, very reverberant. Anyway, so the concert hall we played at in Shanghai was just like the Verbruggen Hall at the Con at the time, and I thought, oh, well, this is interesting. And we used to have these classes at the Con called concert practice, where two bands would play for the rest of the jazz cohort, and then everyone would critique everyone else's playing. So, the usual setup, the second band sound checks first band sound checks second, then they play, and then the second band plays. Well, it was just like walking into the Verbruggen Hall and doing concert practice, but with 10 Part Invention. The other band was the Dave Holland Quartet.
Oh, shit.
And the drummer was Billy Kilson, and I had a few of their albums, and I was really, and I just like, wow, this sitting by the side of the stage and watching him play. And we played the same drums, so I left the tuning and everything to his specs and just put my cymbals up because I didn't want to mess with that. It was like, it was surprising how high he tuned, and but he got this real like warm depth.
Get the body out of the
body, and I hit them and they sounded like little tin cans, so I was like, wow, there's something I don't know about touch here. And so I got to meet Dave Holland, and we're on the same bus going back to the same hotel. There was this one time where James Greening, the trombonist, and I were sort of sitting there together, and Dave was sitting in the front of the bus with his wife Claire, and his big double bass in the massive sort of flight case that they come in was sort of straddling like 10 rows of seats on the bus, and he just got up and just left it on the bus. And Greening and I are looking at each other like, wow, I guess someone's got to get it off. So we took his bass off the bus.
Oblivious, was he?
I don't know. Maybe he was. We just thought that he maybe expected that someone would do it.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know, but someone had to get it off. He certainly didn't lift it off.
Yeah.
So we took it into the lobby. Anyway, but there's this other aspect to meeting him that was really amazing. What happened was the next day after that concert, which was just like playing at an international jazz festival with 10 Part Invention and looking into the wings, and there's Dave Holland standing there watching you. It was like otherworldly for me.
Right.
And I knew that we were going to be going to Beijing and meeting Paul Motion the next day. So, we got to the airport nice and early. It was quite warm in Shanghai. And we took off, probably 2 or 3 hour flight, and about halfway into the flight there was an announcement, and we had to turn back to Shanghai because there was this massive downpour of snow in Beijing. They had to close the airport. So we're like, damn, well, at least it's an early morning flight, they'll clear the runway and we can get a later flight in and make the gig. We sat on the tarmac in the plane, like almost like held hostage for like 6 or 7 hours, and there were these like Italian guys on there who were getting really red under the collar, people, the toilets started overrunning and getting smelly, and it was really strange, And
did you have your sticks in your bag?
I probably did in those days, 1998. Yeah, I used to travel with the sticks in the overhead compartment. I can't do it anymore because they always tell me, can you use that as a weapon? I say, well, I won't.
Oh, really?
But they said, well, someone can, so you have to check them in.
Oh, right.
So, I didn't. We just chatted, I guess. We tried to stay relaxed and like whatever. Well, and then they ushered us back into the terminal. We weren't going to get to Beijing anytime soon, So I was wandering around the terminal with Sandy Evans. And we bumped into Dave and Claire Holland. They were walking back the other way, and Sandy and Dave had met in Shanghai at the gig and had exchanged words. So it turns out Sandy met her husband. Sandy's the tenor saxophone player in Ten Part Invention, by the way. And another, everyone in that band is a legend in Australian jazz. And and Dave sort of opened up his jacket pocket and produced a copy of his latest CD for her, and he said, I wanted you to have this, Sandy. And she said, thank you very much, and we parted ways, and she opened it up, and he'd written a little inscription in there, and it said, Dear Sandy and Tony. Tony is Sandy's husband, Tony Gorman, a great woodwind player. He said, love and music brought you together, let's hope it stays that way, with love from Dave and Claire Holland. So I said, what's that about? She said, well, Tony and I met in the audience at a Dave Holland gig in Europe, like many, many years before. And as it turns out, Sandy's husband, Tony, probably a bit more than maybe 20, 25 years ago, developed multiple sclerosis, unfortunately, and it really knocked him out of action. He was a very busy musician playing around town before that. He's still around, and he's still got a great sense of humour. And well, Sandy relayed that story to Dave, and turns out his mother had MS as well. So there was this kinship there, and this lovely exchange. The generosity of someone like that was so cool. I thought, wow, not only is Dave Holland like a thoroughly awesome musician, but he's a really deep, loving person as well. And to cut the story even shorter.
You did it again.
Yeah. Well, long story short.
Yeah.
You won't ever hear me say that.
Yeah.
We missed the gig in Beijing.
Yeah.
We couldn't make it in time, so I never got to play before Paul Motion. But just the thought that could have happened was just, again, surreal to me. So surreal that it was unreal. It didn't happen. I mean, the experience of playing, I mean, just getting the passport and all that bureaucracy, getting organised to get out of the country, and then to go and play and to earn good money too. Like, they were really, really, per diems and all this. So I wasn't used to any of that, and packed a bunch of money in the bank and came home, and then I was like, wow, well, what's next?
Yeah.
Because I did, and then I did my recital a couple of weeks later, and then the con was finished, and I was like, okay, what do we do now? But that was like I remember I had a distinct feeling after that trip. I don't know why I thought this. It ended up being true, but I thought I'm not going to have this kind of experience again for a very long time, and I certainly won't have the uniqueness of that experience ever again. Of course. It's just magical playing with those guys. I mean, several of them have gone and died now, and I became a permanent member in 2011. My wife and I were honeymooning in Los Angeles and got a phone call in the car. We'd just gone out to see the Donny McCaslin group with Mike Giuliano playing.
Yeah, I was going to say.
We're on our way back to the room in Santa Monica.
Who was playing bass?
It was a guy who I had seen in New York previously. His name's Fema Efron, playing electric bass. Lovely player. He was playing with Wayne Krantz a bit when I saw him. I hadn't heard of him outside of New York, but I met him. And he was a cool guy, and so he just sort of seems to be the guy that, I don't know if Tim Lefebvre isn't available.
I was going to say Tim Lefebvre.
Then they'll get Fema Efron. Hell of a player.
Yeah.
So the phone rang. We're sort of crossing the hills in Los Angeles, and the phone rang. And it was Sandy Evans, and it was a 10 Part Invention annual general meeting. It's an incorporated trust, and they have to have an AGM every year, and they. Right. decided to keep going, and John Pochet actually officially retired from playing the drums that year, which meant he, had to give away the drum chair, but they wanted to keep the band going, so they invited me to be a permanent member. I'd been filling in for him ever since that tour, whenever he was ill, which was always just a magical experience for me. So we're going to Wangaratta on Friday, so it's Wednesday now, so on Friday I'm going to take my girls down to Wangaratta, and we're playing for the Wangaratta Jazz Festival.
Yeah. You're judging.
And I'm judging the National Jazz Awards as well.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
and who's on the panel with you then?
So it'll be me and Hamish Stewart
and
David Jones.
Heavy.
Yeah.
Cool.
Good to hang out with those guys for a couple of days. And I mean, I've been in that contest. I was 20 in 1997, and I came second in it. And I made this entry tape, went into a studio, and I thought, well, I don't expect to get into the finals for the National Jazz Awards. I had seen them on TV previous years with other instruments, saxophone and piano, and just, watching those awards, I think, wow, well, that's where it's at. And when I was at the cons in my third year at the con, and it came up that, they were going to make it available for drums in 1997. I'm like, wow, well, screw it, I'll just put a tape in anyway, and I'm not going to get through, but I'll have a nice demo in case I want to get some gigs.
Yep.
Turns out I got into the top 10, and then I got to play in the finals and ended up coming second.
Can I ask what's involved in the competition?
Yeah, sure.
What are you having to do?
So the deal is it's been pretty much consistent since these days. A couple of tweaks, actually a couple of really good tweaks in the latest version of it. You have to submit, in those days it was a tape of 3 tunes. Right. If I remember correctly, one of them had to be composed by, I think either Duke Ellington or must have been Herbie Hancock. I chose the Herbie Hancock tune, One Finger Snap, that Tony Williams played on. And then he had to play a ballad. So I transcribed this arrangement of Jerry Allen's of Lover Man that Betty Carter sang, which I still love. Dave Holland's on bass, funnily enough, and Jack DeJohnette on the drums. And then the other one, we did this arrangement of all blues in 5/8, which was fun.
Right.
Put the tape in, and I was really surprised to get a letter to say, hey, you're in the top 10. I'm like, holy shit. And I saw the list of names of the other contestants. I'm like, well, there's no way in hell I'm going to get a place. But hey, I'll go down and play in Wangaratta Town Hall. Great. So then you play in the top, the people in the top 10 play a round of heats. And then from that they select who they think are the 3 best. And then you play in the grand finals, I guess, and that gets ranked 1, 2, and 3. Gotcha. And the judges that year were Nico Schäuble, who I was like, wow, I used to watch him on TV with Paul Grabowski on Channel 7 every night. And then the other guy was Eddie Marshall from San Francisco, who I was in Mike Nock's band at the time, and Eddie was Mike Nock's original drummer in his band The Fourth Way, which has been written about in major jazz journals as being actually the first, you'd call it, jazz rock band, like predating Miles Davis going into jazz rock. And I digress a little bit here, but I remember being at the basement one night watching Joe Zawinul Syndicate play and Nathaniel Townsley on drums, and I was standing next to Mike Nock. We were just in the audience together, and Zawinul got on the microphone, and Zawinul is Mr. Synthesizer, right? From the Weather Report days. And he got on the microphone and said, hey everybody, I want to say something. Mike Nock is in the audience tonight, and I got to tell you, Mike Nock was an influence on me, and everyone's going, yeah, Mike. And I've seen it in print too, that Nock showed Zawinul the first ring modulator.
Right.
And he influenced Bill Evans to start playing the Fender Rhodes as Mike Nock, and they were the first band to really sort of put like a straight eighth kind of feel under jazz improvised context. It's like about 1966, I think it was. and that was, it's sort of like on record as being the first. So like this guy's real sort of pivotal.
Mike Nock's left a hell of an influence. I was talking to
sure has.
Darren Mathiasen on Saturday night.
Right.
He's a New Zealand drummer.
Yeah,
plays
right.
for Shapeshifter, and he was the guy that Darren heard him and just went, wow, I need to be doing this.
Yeah, well,
that's what he did.
Yep. Yeah, and he's not the only one. There's a great bass player in America, Michael Formanek, who based his entire career on having heard a Mike Nock tune or record or concert or something, and just the spark lit.
Yep.
And I think he's had that effect on. Well, they're the only ones we know about.
Yeah, that's all we know about.
More.
Yep.
Gosh, what is it about that guy? You know. So Eddie Marshall was the other judge at the Jazz Awards that year, and he actually, the night before I played in the heats, I did see like the major headlining billing act was Mike Nock Quartet. I'll just put those down there. They've gone to sleep.
Yeah.
The Mike Nock
it's
Quartet.
Kind of, sorry.
It was symbolic.
Dave's opened up an old nostalgic stick bag with a whole bunch of drumsticks from a lot of drummers that are no longer with us. And it's Halloween, and the stick bag just fell over by itself.
Just keeled over. The stick bag's no longer.
So that's some freaky shit going on there.
Yeah.
Yep.
God bless you, Alan Turnbull. So I mean, like Mike Nock played that night with his quartet, which I was in at the time, but he had Eddie Marshall on drums, and I just sat there and I just watched and kind of like, okay, well, what's it like? It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
So, just this, I don't know. There's a way that guys like that played. Another drummer from that era, Eric Gravatt, who was the original in Weather Report. There's this energy and this ballsy, just deep stuff. And Mike used to really get off on that, and he wanted. I think he gave all of us local young guys such a hard time because we're not even, a fraction of what someone like Eddie Marshall could bring to the table. So that really inspired me, and I just got up the next morning. I'm like, screw it, I'm just gonna play my heart out. I don't have much. Like, I don't have many chops or anything like that, but I'm just going to play. Yep. And Mike, actually, his band was the supporting band. He played for all the drummers. So I sort of, in a way, felt at home. And I just thought, well, here, I'll see if I can wake up that sleeping giant in Mike that will wake up if the drummer's right, And, I don't know. I've got a recording of it. The ABC played it on the radio, and... it was high energy, pretty loose, but cool. Like the feeling was good.
Did you wake the giant? You think you succeeded?
It was one of the most enjoyable times I've ever had playing. Mike and I were eyeballing each other at one point, and it just felt like a connection, like a oneness, a unity. So I actually think, that was one of the best times I had playing with him. And he said, "Oh man, I thought you were gonna win, But, well, whatever, doesn't matter."
I gotta say, your impersonations are great. Shout out to Jeff Carcass too, because people that don't know, Dave did an interview with Jeff. It was about 8-9 months ago.
Yeah, earlier this year.
Right. Yeah. And all through that interview, your impersonations are fantastic. Dom Familari nailed it. You just nailed it. Dom Familari was the first drum clinic I ever saw.
Oh wow!
In New Zealand.
Yeah.
And we had to travel 2 hours or so to see him, but
goodness,
it's just incredible.
Talking high energy.
But he just captivated you.
Yeah.
As soon as he spoke, you just he just had you in the palm of his hand. It was
real magnetism.
Fantastic.
Real charismatic.
Yeah.
Larger than life, isn't he?
Oh yeah. Sorry. Yep.
Oh no. Dom. Well, that's right. I remember I relayed the instructions he gave me to get into the studio to have the lessons with Jim Chapin. So really detailed, really quite elaborate. And I'm sort of madly trying to scribble them down as he's talking to me. He ended up actually, for subsequent lessons, he was home. And it was cool actually for the first lesson. It was just Jim Chapin and me.
Okay.
And we had free reign of Dom's studio, and so he went with me for about 2 hours the first time, and he said, right, that'll be $75. You know, my Jim Chapin's maybe not as good as it could be, but he just operates in a different part of the larynx.
I don't know what he sounds like.
He's funny, he's quirky, and he's just charged me for the 1 hour, you know, and it was just wow, you know. And then like we, like being in the car with him was an experience. Like it was a half-hour drive, and I think I told Jeff, like, you know, how I started the conversation, but like there was one point like after the lesson in the drive back to the train station where like we'd gotten to know each other quite a bit better, and so the conversation's flowing freely, and he started singing to me. He turns out he had written all these songs, one about Buddy Rich and another one about Dom, and like I don't remember too much of it, but like, you know, it's like you would imagine like an up-tempo ding 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 ding, and he's like, if you're hurting or in trouble, Dom comes hurtling on the double. And, my friend Famularo, he's you know.
Yeah, that's good.
While he's driving,
yeah.
Then what we're like, you know, the shock absorbers in that car were bouncing all over the road, and he's kind of like in and out of the lanes, and and at one point he said, "Do you want to get a beer?" And I said, "Sure. I mean, I've got to get some gas anyway." So we pulled into the service station, and he went into and he got a couple of Coronas and brought them out, and I started. He's drinking beer while he's driving, but to get out of that service station, he had to make a right-hand turn. So coming out, it's dodgy. You know, you've got to cross the other lane of traffic. Yep. Well, he had to make a left. And man, I thought I was going to die. Like we were going to get T-boned. And I'm like, this car like hurtling towards us. Oh, I'm going to die in the hands of Jim Chapin. Yeah, singing these songs and just like a real one-off character, that guy. Yeah. But yeah, he had this song about Dom Famularo, who was a long-time student of his, and I think he was instrumental in, I think, getting. I talked to Dom a bit. So yeah, second lesson I had with him, Dom was home and ended up staying and having dinner at Dom's house, and he had this German student there. There's another guy from Australia who I stayed in touch with for a little while, and we all sat around having dinner and just laughing our asses off, yeah, Dom really held court, you know.
Now, that brings me to your technique. Now, you've been a traditional player for years and years, and just recently you've had to go to match grip.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So.
And why you've had to do that, and a challenge, and...
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I'd been playing the drums for about a year when I saw a film clip of Virgil Donati. I didn't know who Virgil Donati was, but I saw it ended up being him with Southern Sons, and he was playing traditional grip in a film clip. Mm-hmm. And I'm this little kid in, like, you know, well, it must have been 12, I think, in Tamworth. Had my little set of drums for a year, and I thought, oh, I'm going to play like that. Right. And I remember on my practice pad one night having this distinct feeling like, oh, if I squeeze that little bit harder, I can play that little bit faster. Yeah. Which is totally wrong.
Yeah.
So I sort of had this self-made traditional grip ever since. And no one ever really pulled me up on it. Jim Peace showed me a few things that Morello showed him about getting like the fulcrum happening, and a drummer in Tamworth who I spent a lot of time with, Steve Fuller, who's in Hong Kong now. I just got a photo of Andy Gander, just sent me a photo where they're hanging out together in Hong Kong, Steve Fuller and Andy Gander, just two of my heroes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, Steve showed me a couple of things to just stop the stick from slipping out of your hand. Yeah, but like, I really didn't have much of an idea. I mean, I developed some, like I could play pretty fast and play, I guess, whatever rhythmic capacities I had available to me at that time.
Yep.
But on this one, I remember I was on a New Year's Eve gig in Taree, probably going from 2000 to 2001 or 2001 into 2002. And this, like right inside the thumb there's some nerve just went, ow, and shot this pain up my arm. Like, whoa! I don't think I even hit a rim shot or anything. It was just one stroke, hit the wrong place at the wrong time, and I got this tremendous pain. I'm like, wow, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to play matched for the rest of the gig. And I ended up playing matched, but never really practicing it or taking it seriously, because I thought, well, I'll get over this and I'll come back to it, you know. So about 3 months of matched, and then I finally got back to the traditional thing and kept playing for the next, I don't know, probably 10, 12, 13, 14 years. And yeah, maybe 5 years ago or so, that problem started to come back. I'm like, oh my God, you know, what's happening here?
Worse or the same?
Same.
Yep.
Just like a chronic thing, like if I wasn't holding it in the right position, it could be very, very sensitive, even on light strokes. So, you know, I thought, God, I'm going to have to give it away again. Well, at that time, I think I ended up playing matched, and again, not taking it seriously for about 3 years, up until a bit over a year ago, when I thought, no, right, I'm going to get this right. And I did the thing that I tell all my students not to do, and it was just to look at some video on YouTube. I just went on a binge one night, and I'm just like looking up trad grip, watching video after video, and there was this, like, Jim Chapin would have called him a Kevlar head, like a marching guy, who gave this demonstration, and the grip was different than what I knew. And it involved, I had a pretty lazy index finger, which is no good. And I mean, that if you're not using the index finger correctly, it's not going to work. So this guy said the thumb must always be on top of the index finger, right? And I'm like, oh wow, I've never really taken that seriously. So, well, that's different. So I'm going to try that. That's a marching thing, great, from some Kevlar head. And he seemed to be able to play okay. The video had a lot of hits. And I can't remember his name now. But anyway, so I'm like, yeah, well, I'm going to take this seriously. I'm going to really, like, I'm going to get the angle of my drums right. I started slanting them, like, according to the angle of the stick. And I had my toms, like, sloping down here like this, cascading. Yep. And cymbals on my right-hand side were very, very low. And it was cool. I started getting used to that. It was nice. After about, I don't know, 8 or 9 months of that, it was like, yeah, I really dig this setup. And it's funny because I wasn't getting enough definition out of my tom-toms at this time. So I started using smaller toms. I started using like an 8 and a 10 and a 12 and a 14 instead of the usual 10, 12, 14, 16, you know. And yeah.
Is that, just look at a picture there.
Very much inspired by that guy. This is happening for me. This sound, this setup, this touch. I'm getting this size of drum to speak. And I don't know, it would have been late May. I started to develop a sensitivity inside my index finger.
Oh shit.
Like there's a similar kind of nerve response.
Right.
And I'm like, oh God, I've started engaging it, and now it's, maybe I've just got a really sensitive nervous system, you know. So I went inside and I said to my wife, oh, I think I'm going to have to actually just, it's time to shoot the horse and move on, you know, like, it's gotten me this far. And she said, well, do it. Right at exactly like that day, just out of pure coincidence, I got an email from an old friend of mine, Andy, who's a drummer. I met him through Jamie Cameron, and we've stayed in touch over the years. He just sent me, just out of the blue, this video with 2 links in it. He said, hey man, check out this open close shit. And I'm like, oh, I'm not interested in any of this, you know. But I clicked on the links anyway, because I thought, well, it's nice if someone sends you something like that.
Yep.
So the first link was this Brazilian guy. I just can't remember his name right now. I had it down for a while, but it's gone now. Playing the fastest kind of push-pull stuff I've ever seen.
Oh, is it...
if you say it, I'll recognize it. No,
Ronnie
not that
Mader?
guy. I know.
Oh, right, yeah.
He's on Instagram, right?
Incredible, yeah.
No, this is another guy. This guy's even more ridiculous than that.
Okay.
I'll send you a link.
Yeah.
And
even more Johnny Rab ridiculous.
Oh, I think Johnny Rab uses the rim, doesn't he? Like he sort of...
Oh, he does too,
yeah. So no, this is just all in the hand.
Oh,
and
right.
and also like hand-to-hand stuff, so like doing... like overlaying each hand, so you've got like a doubly fast.
Right,
You've got the push-pull in both hands for a single... It's just... It sounds like white noise, it's so fast, you know.
Right.
And I'm like, this is unbelievable. And then in the next link he said, and this guy's got a great explanation of this technique. Clicked on the link and it was a video by a drummer in Minnesota called Gordy Knudsen.
Yep.
Now I had heard his name before, but I was not familiar with his work. Mm-hmm. And so it turns out he's the drummer in the Steve Miller Band. Mm-hmm. And he has been for like over 20 years. Yep. And my dad used to listen to Steve Miller in my youth, you know, Abracadabra and The Joker and those hits. I'm like, oh wow, okay, this is the guy who plays with Steve Miller. Cool, right. And he's got these just unbelievably clear and concise explanations of, like, in the first place, how to use your fingers, which I hadn't taken seriously prior to this. And it was all done with matched grip.
Yep.
And I thought, oh, that's how I'm going to get my doubles underway. And I decided that night, I'm going to change to matched grip. Here's the guy I'm going to follow to get this going on. And I had a gig the next night at Foundry 616 with John Harkins, the piano player, playing like lots of sort of bebop tunes. And I took my little 8-inch tom and all that and played, and I got the spirit level out and I flattened my drums out.
Yeah.
Because you can't play matched on those ridiculous angles.
Yeah.
And even though the spirit
you
level
actually got a spirit level?
Yeah, I did. Because they were flat, but I thought that they were tilting to the left.
Right.
You know,
you must have just been...
A year of this
was
enough. You know, it's only just now I'm feeling comfortable having everything kind of set up for match, you know.
Yep.
And so I had to get the spirit level out. I'm on that gig with Harkins the next night, and it was just, I'm sure the music was okay, but the feeling, I felt so tense and horrible.
Right.
And I'm sure it permeated the gig, and I was just like, God, I'm really going to have to shed, you know, and so I thought, well, I'm just going to, and then I just kept clicking on all of Gordy Knudsen's videos, and he's got this unbelievably elaborate set of videos on how to play, it's called open close, which some people refer to it as push pull, but like he turns out to be quite a character and quite an original thinker. Like I actually think he's a genius. And actually these books here on the stand they're his books.
Okay.
And I wrote back to Andy and said, man, thank you so much. You must have just been reading my mind. I needed this, like, exactly right now. You've really helped me. I'm going to make the transition to matched grip. And then a week later, I got a message from Andrew Habgood, who runs the Vintage and Custom Drum Expo. And he said, hey, and he had announced that he was bringing Benny Greb out in August. So this is, you know, I guess early June now. Yeah, a week after I changed to matched grip, still feeling pretty shitty.
Yeah.
And I got a message from Andrew saying, would you consider opening for Benny Greb in his Sydney clinic? And I'm like, oh, I'm a beginner.
Right.
You know, like...
That's how you felt, yeah?
Yeah, I did. Like, I felt absolutely like a beginner. And if you really think about it, I was a beginner. First time really playing matched grip and actually practicing the techniques and using the hand properly. And I thought, well, I'll, you know, it's in August, so there was like, I don't know, 10 weeks or so. So I took it as a challenge and I said, love to. So then he wrote back and said, great, well look, I'll have to run it by Sonor and Benny first, you know, but I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And once I closed that message, I thought, well, there's no way they're going to say, yeah, this guy can open for Benny Greb. It's not going to happen anyway, so that's good. I can just go back to being my beginner self, you know. And then I got a message, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks later, and Andrew said, like, yeah, Benny's into it. So it's on. And I thought, right, well, now's the time. And so I started studying Gordy's thing pretty seriously, and I think I almost gave myself tendonitis practicing so much so quickly. And I also discovered I was on Instagram one night and I followed Chad Wackerman on there, and he put up a post that said, enter this code into Drum Channel and get 25% off my Murray Spivak course. I'm like, wow, I didn't even know he did a Murray Spivak course. And it's funny because when I started looking at Gordy's thing, I thought, I didn't really know much about the Murray Spivak method, but echoes of it were present in what he was delivering in these videos. And I thought, well, hey, I'm open-minded. The Gordy Knutson open-close thing and the shift completely blew my mind wide open. I had to suspend just about everything that I thought I knew that was going to get me into my old age, and just go, well, it's gotten me this far. Again, the term I use is it's time to shoot the horse and move on.
Yeah.
If I want to get any further, I have to do some new stuff. So yeah, I was open to Murray Spivak, you know, and so I wasn't a member at Drum Channel, but I signed up and I bought, and then you had to buy Chad's course in addition to that.
Yep.
But I put the code in and got my discount.
Yeah.
And it's like maybe 6 or 8 hours of footage of Chad demonstrating with Don Lombardi as his student, like the Murray Spivak technique, including this grip. And a completely new treatment on the rudiments and a practice routine. These were 3 things that had not come across my table in the way that they came previously, and I was like, so that coupled with Gordy's thing was just like, holy shit, this is the treasure trove here of things to look at technically. This is what's going to carry me forward, and this may get me over the line to at least being able to show up to the Benny gig.
Right.
Because I felt like cancelling just about every day, but I committed to practicing more and more and more, and I always know how something went by the way I feel in the car on the way home. Oftentimes, you might think, oh, I might accidentally just drive off that bridge, you know.
Oh, shit.
I mean, I don't think, oh, I'm going to do that, but like, if that happened, it wouldn't be such a bad thing, you know?
Okay.
I don't mean in those terms.
No, I meant,
just
what I mean is, do you get that? Does it hit you that much?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I'm working on overcoming that. That's been a big problem for years. Yeah, I would be in a dressing room after a gig, just in silence with storm clouds
Far out.
around me, you know, and it might have even been a good gig, but my feeling about it wasn't good, you know, and I just, you know, and I let it permeate my life, and it wasn't healthy, and but I'm really happy to be able to say it was cool, man, because like I really went to more trouble than I think I've gone to for any other gigs. I figured, well, I'm going to play to Benny Greb's like 300 plus Sydney audience. It's not my audience, it's his audience.
Yeah, yep.
And I mean, like, they're not there to see me, but I'm going to be inflicted upon them.
Yep.
I'd better make a good impression, or at least as good an impression as I can. They deserve it, you know. They have to suffer through half an hour of someone other than Benny. I've got to give them my best. So yeah, I practiced and I worked on my tunes a lot more than I ever have for any other clinic, and just thinking about soloing and why I feel like I've failed on every other clinic previously, and I never wanted to solo because I had ideas. You know, I can solo on gigs, no worries. If I'm soloing on a tune or even just a free introduction to a tune, I can do that, no worries. But in a clinic environment, it was really hard to just walk out there cold and just start playing solo. So I thought, well, I won't do that. I turned like the end of it. I thought, well, if it works on a gig to sort of have a solo attached to a tune, and because I'm playing with my like Logic on my computer, I can't have a free intro to a tune. So I turned, like I made a cadenza out of the last chord of one of the tunes, and I just thought, well, I'll just go past the end of the tune and just let it rip into a solo, you know, and I actually felt I got better ones out, I think, in my rehearsals, but I think that getting those out helped me get out what I did get out on the gig, which was, I think, acceptable. Probably could be a lot better, but it was acceptable.
Yep.
And and the tunes worked well. My audio setup actually finally worked for the first time ever. I had my drums tuned down a fourth lower than usual. I put new heads on, and I'm like, oh, these sound. And I decided to move. There was about 6 weeks after I changed to Mash. I filled in for Andrew Dickinson one night on a jazz jam session in the city, and they had a little 18-inch bass drum in the house, and I just had to take a snare drum and some hardware. So I didn't even have any tom-toms, and I'm playing with these young kids from the con who were, I didn't know this kid was 18, Yannick Coffey, unbelievable guitarist, and they really kicked my ass that night, but I felt like I could keep up with their young asses, you know, and I felt like for the first time, after 6 weeks, it's working. That's great. And at that point I knew I've just got to now concentrate on the music for this Benny set, so I got some new heads, and I realised actually the 8-inch tom shits me, you know, like it's really limited in its sound, and so I thought, well, okay, I'll just move them back up again to bigger sizes. And it's funny because with the Spivak and Knudsen techniques, I could suddenly get the articulation out of my toms that I'd been missing previously, and while I was using the smaller sizes, and it was okay to tune them down quite a bit from where I was before. So they actually had this real life to them that I hadn't. It was all new. Awesome. So that was, so it was weird, you know, like, why would you ask a beginner to open for Benny Graham? That's how I felt, but I thought, well, I'll get it together if I can. So, the drive home, I felt, Benny was awesome. Like, we got about half an hour to hang out backstage before I went on, and there were a lot of people there, but we just got this time alone, and we just started chatting, and he really helped me. I don't think I was outwardly nervous or anxious, but I certainly felt nervous on the inside. Maybe he sensed that or not, but he really, with the things that he said, he just really helped me calm down and just feel good about just being myself.
Yeah, he's something else, isn't he?
He is. Yeah. He's really tapped into something that's deep, that a lot of people like to hear. And it's I don't know what it is, nothing to do with the drums. It's just the holistic image that he puts forward. It's really, really inspiring. A lot of my students are big fans of that. I found out about him through my students, you know. Right. Originally, but it was cool. Like when I set up at the venue, like, you know, everyone was there helping out, and I had my drums there, and you know, with people like that, you normally have to introduce yourself. Oh, hi, I'm such and such from Sydney, and you know, but it was cool because he'd obviously checked me out to know whether or not he was going to approve having me play. So when he arrived, he beat me to the, oh, nice to meet you, man, you know.
Awesome.
I said, oh, I didn't have to introduce myself.
That's cool.
And I mean, not that means anything, but it was a cool experience for me.
That is a cool thing. Make you feel special.
Yeah. For the brief moment in your life.
Yeah.
You know?
Now, what music do you listen to for recreation to feel good? Is it jazz, or do you listen to sort of modern?
Well,
and how does that music make you feel? Are you analysing the music, or can you get into music and close your eyes and just groove and get lost?
It's a day-to-day thing for me. I used to, like, you know, when I was a lot younger, I would, if I had to do a tax return or something, I would put Tony Williams on and listen, you know. I think it was a distraction from the annoying burden of having to do your tax return. But these days I can't listen to anything when I'm doing something. I just can't, because I get completely...
It takes you somewhere.
Yeah, it does. So I only listen to listen, you know, and I can't help but listen with analytical ears. I've analysed stuff for so many years. Yeah. It is just...
That's I was thinking a lot about that today, you know, being as analytical as you are, and, you know, how much study you do and the deep thinking you do, and especially after listening to Jeff's podcast. I knew that was a question I had to ask.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like, when I say analytical, but I mean, all analysis means is to break something down.
Yeah.
So, I might just concentrate on something, but I'm like I should be clear to say that like I'm not analysing it in a theoretical way.
Yep.
I just listen to the sound and I enjoy really good sound. The thing I've been listening to most lately is Kate Bush's album Aerial from 2005. Like over and over again in the car. I can't get enough of it. I did a gig, I don't know, house party about a year ago. A friend of mine who I record a lot of TV jingles for. He sometimes puts parties on in his house, and I've been going over and playing the drums. Anyway, his wife is a singer, and he sent a list of tunes that we were going to cover that night, and one of them was this track Pi by Kate Bush. Pi is in the number, P-I, you know. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, this will be interesting. I haven't listened, I don't know anything about, I mean, Kate Bush had some iconic hits when I was a kid, and I saw her on the Kenny Everett show, and, you know, she's out there in the collective unconscious, but wasn't aware of her career moves. And anyway, I put this track on, and I nearly fell out of my seat. It was so, she can sing about anything in the most interesting possible ways. With the most emotive vocal prowess, and she plays great piano too. And I think she has a lot of say in the production of her albums. You know, she plays a lot of the synthesizers on there, and I was just absolutely intrigued and transfixed by this track Pi. So I thought, well, I did a bit of research on her, and it turns out that was part of an album that was a comeback album for her in 2005. She put her career on hold for like 12 years to raise her son, and then released this album. And I was completely ignorant of it when it came out. I had my head fair and square up my ass, you know, in jazz snobbery. I just started my PhD that year, so I didn't want to know what Kate Bush was up to. And but this just kind of completely woke me up out of this stupor, and I'm like, wow, this is, I want to play music like this. You know, and I wrote to the drummer, Stuart Elliott in London. I said, man, what great playing on that album. And he wrote back and said, oh, thank you, you know. And I checked out the rest of the album. I put it on in the car, and my daughter and I listened to it, and she loves it, you know. And there's one track on there called A Choral Room, and just about every time I listen to it, I cry. No drums, it's just Kate Bush singing and playing the piano and singing about her mother. And I can't explain it. It may be, at least at the moment, my favourite piece of music, for reasons I can't explain.
The more modern artist for me that does that is Adele for me.
Oh yeah, wow. Yeah, so I haven't checked out enough, but I know that voice, like...
It's one song on a new album. I was driving to a gig, and I was driving to the Epping Tunnel, not Cross City Tunnel. Anyway,
Lane Cove Tunnel.
Lane Cove Tunnel. Yeah. Driving through that, and the song came on, and you can hear the electric bass, and you hear some keys, and she starts singing, and tears streaming down my face. I'm going, what the hell is this? What?
That's the statement.
Oh my God! You know, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was the sounds. It was the sound of the bass and the piano and her voice. Just sounded incredible.
I mean, it's nice to know that you can go there, right? Like,
yeah.
And I think there's always an element of that in, you know, I guess the other music I've been listening to probably more than anything in the last almost 5 years is a Swiss drummer composer by the name of Pierre Favre, or Favre, I think is the pronunciation. The Pierre Favre ensemble. There is another genius right there. There's an album on ECM called Fleuve. I think that's the pronunciation, which means flow. And he's got these, the Pierre Favre ensemble is always a different lineup for every album, and his writing is just off the wall. It's really fantastic, large ensemble, almost chamber music. But his drum set, he's got this massive set of drums, like a vintage Ludwig set with an 18-inch bass drum. on his right foot and a 24-inch bass drum on his left foot, and 3 toms, 2 floor toms, but then all these other like dumbecks and big like cheese wheel looking thing, massive big thing, and congas and bongos that he hits with mallets and brushes, and his hands, and these racks and racks of Paiste cymbals and gongs. I read about him in Modern Drummer. Peter Erskine was on the cover. I think it was November 1993. Pierre Favre was the second story, and I remember seeing the photos of him. And I saw the CD in the store in Birdland one time. I had a radio show at the time, and I thought, this would be interesting. Pierre Favre. I actually been meaning to check him out, and I used to play it on my radio show. And I have a theory that he was incredibly influential in the 1970s. Turns out he was the Paiste cymbal rep for the Paiste headquarters. He's Swiss, right? Yeah. And if you look at it, all the jazz drummers at the time, Jack DeJohnette, Al Foster, and Paul Motion in particular, were all playing Paiste cymbals. So they were dealing with Pierre Favre. And who knows? Did he influence them? I think he did, because his first album was in 1967. It was on ECM. It's a tape of solo drumming called Solo Drums, I think. And it's a concert. It was a live concert that was recorded, and exquisite sound. Man, I got to say, I only heard that for the first time, I think, last year. And you consider what was coming out of America in 1967 and how amazing that was. This is amazing in a whole other way. It's definitely a precursor to anything that Terry Bozzio was getting into, but in a much more subtle way. And he's really opened up my mind about the drum set, with getting a really vast array of timbres and pitches, and just contrasting sounds, long notes, short notes, high and low, really like brittle and soft. I mean, if I could be half the drummer Pierre Favre is, that would be a life well lived, And I wrote to him and I said, man, thank you so much. Turns out his daughter lives in Mullumbimby, and he's been out here a couple of times, and he said in his lovely sort of broken English, I mean, he speaks probably 3 languages, so you can forgive him. He says, I'm retiring to my cellar every night to try and figure out the mysteries. So, he's in his 70s, and he's still trying to figure it out. His compositions are absolutely sublime. So Pierre Favre and Kate Bush are probably what I've been checking out most, as well as like I'll get nostalgic and get all my old Andy Gander recordings every now and again if I want to really just get a dose of drumming. Yeah, sure. Of Nicole Udo or Tony Williams or Elvin. And I always come back to Jack DeJohnette, but I mean they come and go. Yeah, of course. But these, I'm really interested in the fact that all I've been interested in the last few years have been Pierre Favre and Kate Bush. And actually, the other thing, like I mentioned Paul Motion a few times today, like that same honeymoon that I was on with my wife when Sandy Evans called and offered me the job in 10 Part Invention. Well, I was in New York, and there's a great drummer. I don't know if you know Loz Benson. Yeah. I don't know her personally. I know who she is. She's great. She's really a lot of fun, and she's a great drummer and a great singer too. Real motivated person. I've known Loz for quite a few years, and anyway, it turns out she happened to be in New York at that same time that we ended up in New York on the honeymoon, and I saw that Paul Motion was playing in the Cornelius Street Cafe. So Loz and I were like, hey, what's on? Let's go and see a gig together, So my wife had a dinner date with an old school friend of hers, and Paul Motion was playing. So I got a leave pass to go and see Paul Motion with Loz Benson and her family. And the Cornelius Street Cafe was as narrow as a toothpick, and really long. And right up the end of the room, you could see there was enough room for a piano, double bass, and a small set of drums. I can see, that is Paul Motion up there. And it's like September 2011. And I had seen him previously at the Village Vanguard and knocked me out, you know, with he was playing with Joe Lovano and Bill Frisell. That was really something else. But this time it was just with this pianist, Annette somebody, I can't remember her last name, and somebody Wong on bass. And I have to admit this, you know, it reveals shortcomings and limitations in my, you know, I'll make myself vulnerable here, you know, like I have to admit I was standing there going, I don't get this. I love Paul Motion, my God, I had all these albums of his and I'm listening to this gig and I'm going, it just sounds unrehearsed and he's missing endings. You know, you'd hear students do a better job of endings than this. These are the thoughts that were going through my head. And, you know, and he walked past me after the set and it was one of those moments where you go, oh, do I, don't I, you know, and I didn't, I let him go. I saw Loz there and talked to her and we were both saying, yeah, gee, you know, I'm not really sure if that was worth it. It was expensive to get in there, this tiny little toothpick of a room. Anyway, a few years later I was on the internet and I found a blog article by this bassist Wong. I'm pretty sure it was Wong, somebody Wong. And he was talking about that gig, which turned out to be Paul Motion's last gig before he died. He died about 2 weeks later.
Oh, shit.
So Loz and I were at Paul Motion's last gig. And we were both going, you know, and again, like it reveals shortcomings. And I won't speak for Loz.
So he probably wasn't very lucid.
Well, he was sick. Like I think he had some kidney problems or something. But
yeah, right.
But the funny thing is that it was actually videotaped and it's on YouTube. So, you know, this blog article linked to the video. And I'm going to watch this gig back again. And also in the blog article, he mentioned that they deliberately, like they booked him for the specific purpose of not rehearsing and not revealing any of the music to him in advance, that he just had to respond to what he heard. So now I know that, I'm armed with that knowledge, and I go back and I listen to it, and it's unbelievably great.
Yeah, right.
You know, but when I was there in person and I didn't understand what they were going for, it didn't strike me.
You probably weren't the only ones in the room thinking
that
too.
No doubt, yeah. Maybe it was a well-known thing that, you know,
okay.
I mean, I've heard lots of things about him, like if ever a band leader asked him to do something, he would do the opposite.
Yeah, right.
So if you wanted to do something, you'd have to ask him to do the opposite to get him to do it.
Gotcha.
You know, he was kind of a real creative, you know, wacky guy like that, I believe. And I think about that all the time. I just think about, like, you know, like on many levels. I mean, I don't want to get lost in it, but it's just, yeah, to listen back to it, you know, years later and understanding the context and just going, well, wow, this is actually really amazing. Why am I so limited that I couldn't appreciate it in situ right at the time? I'll never understand it. Or maybe hopefully I will, but I don't expect that these things can be understood. But it sort of helped me kind of feel like I need to be more open when I'm listening to something. You know, like the Jazz Awards are coming up this weekend, and I had to listen to 46 recorded entries so that we could pick a top 10, you know, and it was, you know, I couldn't go more than, it took about 15 hours. And I couldn't go more than 2.5 hours at a time. Like as soon as I started to feel myself get fatigued, I stopped because I didn't want to give anyone less of a chance.
Yeah, that's right.
And gee, there are some great young drummers around. I mean, obviously 36 people got disappointed that they weren't in the top 10, but I mean, there wasn't one entry there that shouldn't have been there. Everyone was great. Everyone had their own strengths and weaknesses.
Right.
Some had more and some had less, I guess. You know. But just, I'm always questioning that, like how, like really genuinely, spontaneously being in the moment and trying to appreciate the value that's like, well, right here now, you know. It's like, it's a challenge to try and find it.
Yeah.
Slot into that groove.
Yeah.
And I think about, like, you know, then how does that affect playing? How much, you know, I record all my gigs. Okay. And I listen back to them and I'm always surprised, like, why didn't I hear that little thing that the piano player did there? I remember this bit and I remember that bit, but I wasn't even aware that that was going on. That's something I could have responded to. Why didn't I hear it? And how can I open my...
Are you hard on yourself when you hear it?
Oh, well, I mean, Steve McKenna used to say to me on gigs like, "Oh, mate, you know, it's gone. Just forget about it if I made a mistake or something. You know, just forget about it and move on." No, I'm trying to like those storm clouds I mentioned before.
That's what I was just thinking driving home.
No, I'm trying to overcome that.
Yep.
Like, because there is it. Like, yeah, if I made a mistake in the first tune on a gig and there's still 2 sets to do, it used to be that one mistake would ruin my feeling for the rest of the gig. And maybe the music was okay, but I was in such a state that it didn't feel good to me. And so I think that if you are in that state, I think that does affect the music. And I don't want to be that guy. I want to... I don't know what... I've been working on it very conscientiously and observing it. And actually I have been able to push it aside. Recognizing the difference between the feeling and the thought and I don't know, just the online experience of it. It's not. Yeah, so I think McKenna was right. Just move on. You know, it's gone. It's in the past. You can't fix it. You can't change it. It's just you have to accept what it is, and that acceptance is a big call. Like, you know, I think all these great names that we've been talking about tonight, you know, like Vinnie Colaiuta comes to mind, and I think it's almost as though like he would be happy to offer any recording of any single occasion of him playing the drums, you know, and it just happens to be that this stuff came out that day. If he did it the following day, it would have been different stuff that came out, or even another take. It just happened to be that take, you know, and then we can obsess over that stuff and go, "Oh my God, that's incredible!" But it was just like, "Oh, that's what I did then." Yeah. But play it tomorrow, and I'm going to do something else. And it seems to me, someone like that, and you know, Andy Gander and these genius drummers are, unless they genuinely do screw up. I mean, you rarely hear it. They're so concentrated. It seems like, I want to get to that level where you know, I'll be like, and when I record, I want to try and I want to be able to live with every take, especially in the jazz environment, because someone might screw up their solo on this take, but everything else was perfect, or someone screwed up the head, and for whatever reason, for the setup, they can't overdub it, fixes or anything like that. Right. There might be spill going into the other microphones, and so, you know, these things happen. Inevitably, someone's going to be not happy with something. Yep. You don't know, and I decided to try and make that not me. Cool. I haven't made it yet, but that's my goal, is to try and work on my thing so that it's good enough. So that they can take any part of it they want. I think Miles said that after one of the tunes. He said, "You can take any part of that you want." And I want that. Yeah. That's what I'm striving for, because it's like life's too short otherwise to have all the anxiety. Oh no, I didn't. You know, to get precious about all this stuff. Yeah. But it's a lot of work. Like it's like on many levels. You know, just trying to learn how to concentrate. It's hard. Yeah.
I've always wanted to know how sort of modern day endorsements work as opposed to how they may have been back in the early days. Sure. Are things changing? Are you having to do different things now to promote these companies with social media and stuff like that, as to, you know, how it used to be before social media? You know what I'm saying? Well,
I guess I'm one of those. I can't remember what the name of my particular generation is. It's a funny name. It's not X and it's not Z. It's there's a unique one for people born in.
Yeah, I was born in. One.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so we straddle the analog and digital worlds.
Yeah, yes, that's right. Yeah.
Grew up analog and have an adult life in a digital world. So it was all still very much analog. When I signed up with, didn't sign up, there's no contract as such. Like Sonor pretty much, I guess, has a largely, I mean, I'm sure the top tier guys like Jack DeJohnette and those guys is probably contractual, but it's pretty much a gentleman's contract, you might say. So it's an agreement, you know. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, I used to, when I was living at home, for a little while there, I used to babysit some of our family friends' kids, earn a little bit of pocket money, and just help them out, you know. And I was madly in love with the drums at this time, and I used to go to the music shop and just borrow all their catalogues.
Yeah.
So that I could just like pour over them. So I used to, you know, and I looked at all the catalogs from all the manufacturers, you know, and we saw Phil Collins play at the Entertainment Centre in 1990, I think, and he had Chester Thompson playing.
Yep.
So Phil had a black Gretsch kit with his concert toms.
Yep.
And Chester Thompson had an
That
ebony signature ebony.
Yeah, I know the kit. Yeah.
With like every tom size you could get, and
I've got the But Seriously Live VHS.
That's the one.
Yeah, and I've watched that 1,000 times. So I know
Me
that
too.
kit. Yeah.
The sound of Chester's drums that night, and on that video.
Yep.
Just, I mean, I love Phil Collins' sound, but Chester, his 16-inch floor tom.
Well, even the higher tom.
Yeah, all of them. Phil's drums sort of barked.
Yep.
But Chester's drums, they roared, you know. Like,
Yeah.
But it was a certain quality of controlled roar. And I had that overhead footage of him in that drum duet, you know, and he'd boom, boom, go, you know. I was like, wow, that's the sound. And I started to read all the different catalogs, and I'm like, yeah, Sonor, absolutely, man, these are the best drums. So they were still owned by the Link family in these days. The original founders, they fled from East Germany, and they actually, like, they survived. You know, like the Sonor factory was appropriated in the war times, and they were commissioned to make, you know, military, you know, devices rather than snare drums. And they fled. Wow, which Link was it? Otto Link, I think, and you know, his grandson Horst. So they fled and made it to the West. Unbelievable, and they didn't die, you know. So I was like, wow, the history is really quite rich. These guys have been around since, I think it's 1875, I think. And they managed to get through that, you know. And I'm looking at these real, like they commissioned the German Institute of Physics to conduct tests on how sound is actually made on a drum. And they determined that it's actually the resonance of the drum head that produces the sound, and the shell should be passive, actually, and it becomes a kind of a resonating chamber, but it is actually the vibration of the heads. Actually, this is really interesting, right? I'm glad you asked. I've got a theory here that, you know, and they said, you know, if it's like, if the shell is really dense and thick and rigid and passive, as in it doesn't vibrate, it doesn't matter how you mount it, right? And you might remember the Sonor drums in the 80s had those big protruding arms like the Pearl and Yamaha thing, but they also had the tom mount actually went significantly inside the shell, and it had this interesting way of holding the arm.
Right.
I had a set of signatures for a few years there, so I'm aware of it, and they were unique drums. I almost regret getting rid of them, but I had to. I'm glad they're gone. And yeah, the resonance of the head. That's what produces the sound on a drum. So, and that's if you make the shells right, the fundamental tone of the drum projects. You don't get funny overtones.
Yep.
You know, that instantly made me think of Chester's floor toms.
Right.
You know. Anyway, so I started hearing. I got a Steve Smith Vital Information live album, and I knew he was a Sonor player. And the drums sound incredible on that. They're either highlights or Sonor lights. I'm not sure, but either way, like every recording I've heard him play on, the sound is unbelievable. And then I started hearing Jack DeJohnette on highlights and old Sonor lights, and I heard Adam Nussbaum with his signature highlights, and Jeff Tain Watts, and I'm like, well, ever since I was young, this is the sound for me.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to commercialize the ABC, but I thought, well, okay, I'm going to be on TV every week for a year. I'm going to leverage that and take the opportunity to try and get some endorsements set up. So I wrote to Tony Italia they were called Sonar Link in Melbourne at the time, the distributor for Sonar, and I said, look, I'm going to be on TV. I love Sonar. I would always wanted to play them. I would love to promote the brand on the ABC. Would you be into it? I wrote him a letter and I told him I'll call you in a week, and I called him and he said, I got your letter, and he said, well, what do you want from us? And I said, well, like I said, a drums, please, you know. So I got a really good deal on a set of designer drums, which were custom ordered, and ironically enough, they arrived the very day after we finished production for the year. And even though the show was supposed to go on into the next year, the ABC changed management and they ended up cutting our show.
Right.
So the show didn't go on, but I had these drums, and my goodness, like, I'm so grateful. Sonar has kept me on all these years.
Yeah. And how long has that been now?
Well, it's 21 years.
Well, okay.
So, sorry, it'll be 20 years next year.
Yeah, wow.
That was 1999. So, you know, and I've kept up a good relationship with Tony, and I try to, the drums speak for themselves.
Yeah.
I don't have to speak for them.
Yep.
I just have to try and play good, you know. Like, it's interesting that since I've changed my technique these last few months, I've got a ProLite brass snare that I use, and I haven't changed a thing about it, and it sounds like a different drum.
Okay.
Because of the technique. And suddenly I'm like, you know, the toms are speaking now.
Right.
The snare drum is much more crisp and refined, and I'm like, man, this is exactly the same set of drums I've been playing for about 4 or 5 years now.
So what do you think? Why do you think that is?
Well, this drum has mesh heads on it, so this has a twin set in those bags that go out to gigs, and this just stays here. We're going to get this soundproof in a couple next year, I think. But for now, I'm using silent stroke heads, right?
Oh, right. Yeah.
So you can't really tell the difference on here. Well, that's the same drum, but when like on the drums that have got proper heads on them, it's just much more crisp and much more sensitive. I just noticed. I was in the studio last week or week before last. This is really responsive. More so than I ever remember it being.
Is it because your body and your ears in a different spot when you hit? Possibly? From that to...
Well, you know what the big difference is, I think, like, and I learned this through the Murray Spivak technique. I realized when I thought I was relaxed with the technique I was using before, I actually wasn't for nearly 20 years. And that's bad. And when you think something's going well and it's actually not, that messes with my head. Retrospectively, I go, God, what else wasn't right in my life all that time, you know? And when you actually learn to play a proper stroke, which, as far as I understand about Murray Spivak, like, he was like Chad says this in the course. If you look Murray Spivak up on Google, it brings up a Wikipedia page which lists him as an audio engineer. He was born in 1903, died in 1994 or 91, and he actually was an audio engineer in New York, Russian guy, you know, but then you grew up in New York. He used to be a trap set player, so he'd get around town with the skulls and cowbells and stuff, and you know, he was actually like a legitimate symphonic snare drum player and played mallets as well. So the snare drum technique is that symphonic stuff. And he used to get around, what he would do is he would accompany silent films, the traps, you know. And then suddenly the technology was available to add sound to movies. Well, guess what? He became a sound design engineer.
Right.
And ended up, he did sound design on the original King Kong in 1933.
Right.
You hear the chick screaming in the tree, oh, oh, you know, and the thing's roaring in the background, roar. Well, Murray Spivak invented that roar. It's like a lion and an elephant blended and played backwards or something, you know. And you hear the occasional little xylophone note poking out. You go, oh, that's Murray Spivak. So, and he did The Sound of Music and all these iconic films.
Right.
Anyway, so in the 70s when Chad was studying with him, he left the film industry and just concentrated on teaching, and he was also Louis Belson's teacher. And so it's actually coming from that symphonic background. Now, the technique that I knew was more sort of marching, rudimental, and Chapin said, yeah, this is appropriate for drum set, and it is. A lot of it is, like Moeller and all of that. It's just really incredible. But there's an aspect missing in my whole thing, and yeah. So when you actually make a stroke, I'm really conscious of this these days. It's almost become automatic. It's a few things to still tweak, but you can actually, the rebound actually works properly. I mean, I'd have to go into great detail to explain it. I won't bother with that, but that I have noticed very recently that the sound has changed, and I'm relaxed. That's the main thing. It's like tension-free playing.
Yep.
So when you're relaxed, the blood's flowing through your body. You know what I mean? And your brain gets oxygenated, and you're going to be more conscious, I think. So maybe it is also a perceptual change. Mm-hmm. Maybe hearing things a bit differently, as well as just actually affecting them differently. So I don't know. It's just interesting to sort of observe.
Yeah, no, that's really cool.
But yeah, with Sonor, like I'm very lucky. And I've met Karl-Heinz Menzel, and I've been in touch with the guys in Germany. I haven't been to the factory, but I'd love to go. But then like I went with it because that's what I loved. Mm. And if they dropped me, I'd be happy to still keep playing. These drums could last me until my death, very happily.
Yep.
And it's the same for Bosphorus. Like I managed to free my mind. I used to play one of the big three, I even had an endorsement deal when I was doing the TV show with one of the old big three. Mm-hmm. And then their distributor here just was the most ridiculous bullshit corporate setup.
Right.
They were so inept at being warm and staying in touch, and the artist guy changed hands all the time. I was writing emails to a defunct address that was 3 artist relations guys earlier.
Right. And
it ended up losing. I used to get Christmas cards from that company, and then it stopped happening, and I'm like, what's happened here? And they said, oh yeah, you stopped being in touch. And I'm like, I didn't stop being in touch. You stopped telling me who to write to. Like, no one responded to my messages, but I kept sending them, and I thought, well, screw this. I don't want to be part of this anymore anyway. And this is when my ears opened up to Bosphorus. I'm like, well, I can play anything I want now.
Yeah.
What sounds good to me?
Yeah.
I started tapping around online, actually, on MP3s.
Yeah.
I heard these Bosphorus cymbals, and man, like, I still have the same, the cymbals are in my bag over there.
Yeah.
Come to every gig. They've been with me pretty much almost 10 years, and still to this day, man, like, those ride cymbals, the musicians I play with, they say, that's the cymbal for me. Yeah. They all say it. I love your cymbals, man. They don't get in the way. Whereas these old cymbals I used to have, sure, they sound nice for the drummer, lots of tone,
of course,
but they get in the way of the music.
Yeah.
So I got all these compliments. So I was like, well, these are the cymbals for me, for sure. So I was in Brisbane on tour with Galapagos Duck, and I know that the Bosphorus distributor was up there, so I wrote to them and invited them to the gig at the Brisbane Jazz Club, and said, look, I'd love to take the opportunity to promote the brand if that's at all possible. And I got a call the very next day. And they said, oh, look, we checked you out and we'd love to have you. And would you like to try for like a deal with Bosphorus in Turkey? Some guys are happy to go with just the distributor, but I said, well, if I can, I'd love to. Yeah. So they ended up putting me forward and they went for it. And so they sent a contract out and I signed that. And they've been really lovely. Like, they're a very small operation. Yep. It's the old handmade Turkish thing. Yeah. It's actually the same lineage of people who were doing the original ones, So, I mean, these are actually for real handmade.
Yeah.
Those ones that are made, like, you can make it entirely with a machine and just hit it once with a human hand with a hammer and say it's hand hammered. Yeah, good. So there's a bit of
or add next to
corporate
it,
mendacity there, So to me, these are the genuine.
Yeah.
And I love hitting them,
Yeah.
And gosh, yeah. So I don't know. I just if I ever if I have an opportunity, if I'm in the world where like I can leverage, like if I do an appearance at a drum show or something like that, I figure, well, if I'm performing at the same thing that you're paying money to exhibit at, well, there's got to be some kind of alignment there. So I approach these guys and I say, look, I've been playing your product for years and I love it. I don't see myself using anything else. It took me a while to settle on my sticks, but I've been playing the Vader session sticks for like 10 years now. Since I got the Bosphorus, actually. Like, I'm like, what stick am I going to use?
Yeah.
Before that, I never knew what it was going to be, but I haven't played any other sticks since then. So I managed to, you know, I'm very lucky. Every time I ask them, I expect them to say no, but they turn around and say yes. So
must be doing something right, mate.
Well, I don't know what it is, if I am, but like, you'll see all these old DW stands here.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a whole set of their new ultralight stands in my trap case. Now these stay here. They're just a little bit too heavy to take out, but I still love the functionality of them, so they stay here in the studio.
Yeah.
I managed to sign an agreement with them, and I'm very, very lucky. It just, I don't know. I like being a part of that. The social media thing, I mean, I don't know, I have a very modest presence on those things. I try as good as I can to keep up appearances, but I'm not really that serious about it. My hand gets sore if I hold my phone too much, so I don't hold it as much anymore. So I actually try to minimize that as much as I can, but if there's something good, I'll pop it up. I don't actually understand anything, like why is it there? Originally it was a good way to stay in touch with old friends on Facebook, you know, but you're never really in touch with them anyway, you know, those relationships. It's nice, but I don't know. I don't really want to be on there, like, seeing, like, I might not have thought about this person. Yeah. All of a sudden you're scrolling down, you see, and you're like, oh, it puts you in another state. I'm trying, I threw my TV out in 2000. Yeah. I didn't want the media having such an influence on me. Yep. So I threw it out. Yep. And I never looked back, you know. Cool. We've got a TV in the house, right? But we've got like Netflix and stuff, so it's sort of like, well, if we want to watch something, we like that too. We don't just sit and watch TV. But yeah, like the social media thing came in through the back door, you know, and all of a sudden there's all the advertising and all this shit, you know, and I'm like, oh, hang on, this is what I wanted to get rid of, like, well, what is it now, 18 years ago now. And it's come back in a bigger, more bold way. It's more intrusive and it's in your face and it's there all the time. You get the notification. It's set up like a poker machine. Yeah, you're right. So I got addicted there for a while, I'll admit it. Yeah. But I'm really trying to control that because it really distracts me from actually what I want to do, which is get better on the drums. Yeah. So I found since I've started this podcast, I mean, I've had to monitor those things to get the word out. Yeah, but I'm finding that I'm doing it too much. Right. And I'm becoming kind of obsessed with it. Yeah, it's a tricky balance. Yeah, it is. Yeah. So it's been stressing me out a bit. Yeah. That's why I was thinking about your filing method that you spoke about. Yeah. I need something like that, you know, that I can put everything back in its place, and you know. It's tricky. It's really tricky. It is. Yeah. Like it's alive. The whole thing is never. Yeah. One thing that I've learned is that nothing is really ever static. You know. Yeah. You can't ever put anything actually in its place. I actually, you know, something that I've been getting into probably since that chat I had with Jeff is there's this method which I can thoroughly recommend called the KonMari method. There's this Japanese woman, Marie Kondo. So the KonMari method is based on her name. She's got a book out called The Art of Tidying or something like that. Mm-hmm. Which has turned into the KonMari method, you know, and she's got this elaborate process for tidying your premises through several stages. You know, the first thing you do is you go through all your clothes, every single item of clothing, including shoes, belts, ties, you name it. You throw them all in a massive big pile, and you handle each single one, and you go, does this spark joy? Oh yeah. You'd be surprised what kind of answers. You get this thing you've been holding on to for years. It doesn't. Yeah. So if it's in a good shape, you'll put it in a donate pile. And if it's no good to donate, you just throw it in the bin. Yeah. And then and the thing is, you hang on to the things that spark joy. So actually, all the clothes that you wear bring joy to your life, right? Yeah. So because that's the easiest thing to start with, she goes through different stages. So I've only just finished the second stage, which is tidying all of your books and magazines. I've got the room next door here has just got wall-to-wall books and magazines and what have you. Like 5 more of those. And I had to go through and I cleared out like a whole shelf worth of books and donated them all to Lifeline.
Yep.
Because they're sort of a bit more tricky to get rid of, but she puts forward cases for, like, really strong cases for getting rid of books that you actually thought you should hang on to. So that was a great decluttering process. The next thing for me is like going through this bloody great big filing cabinet, and what I'm going to try and do is reduce that, get rid of that, and have only what I need in those 3 folders over there.
Yeah, right.
Like the process can reduce that. 4 drawers of filing cabinet. I mean, this drawer here, that's full of all the music I've played for the last 20 years. So
Right.
do I hang on to that? I don't know. Like, does it spark joy? I guess you have to go through every single piece of paper.
Right, I got you. Yeah.
And ask the question: does this spark joy? So
you probably find a lot of that does though. You get memories come
I
back.
suspect so, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
You know, but they're probably more there for like sentimental reasons.
Of course.
So, then you go through so clothes, books, then papers. That's that section I'm about to start.
Yeah.
And then like household stuff, but we're actually pretty good inside. Like we've got a minimalist setup in there, and it's all organised and tidy. My wife's great for that. So that's actually already done. That's just how we live.
Yep.
And then the 5th area is like the mementos, the cement.
Sure.
That's you've got such an emotional attachment to these things. So you've gone through these other ones to get better at answering that question: does this spark joy? And then finally you can sort of get rid of these things that you felt you needed to hang on to. And that's a fascinating process. I feel much lighter, actually. Less things to worry about. Like, I want to simplify my life.
Awesome.
And that's one way I'm finding helpful, as well as that sort of filing, like mental filing thing. But I don't know, my computer is... I mean, I've been, transferring my data from computer to computer since 2005. I think, like, the Finder doesn't actually work properly.
Okay.
It's like, I think it's time to actually, like, not import everything from this computer, get a new computer and just start afresh.
Yeah.
Maybe pop everything on a hard drive.
Hard drive, man. Yeah.
But because there's a lot on there that doesn't need to be there. And I don't want to go through that in the same way that I've gone through that I'm about to go through my papers. It's like,
yeah, sure.
I don't want to sit in front of that damn screen for so long, you know. It's like minimal computer usage, minimal device usage.
Yeah.
More hitting stuff.
Yeah.
And that's, my life goal is to set it up so that I can be here. Probably for the goal is like, I get it sometimes, like probably 7.5 hours a day.
Great.
And just learning. But you've got to really be in control for that to happen. And there are glimmers of it shining through.
Mm.
Yeah. What else?
Well, I guess the last thing I want to ask, and what are your thoughts on these music TV shows, Idol and The Voice and...
Well, do you have a take on it or
Not particularly. I've just been asking a few people, seeing what they think, and
I guess I've
been
got...
a few people get quite emotional about it.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if you've got a gig in the band, that's awesome, like Warren Trout, I think, is doing a lot of those things, and my friend Matt Keegan and the horn players, Ray Cassar and James Kennedy, I play a lot with them, and they're usually in the horn section for those things. So for them, it's great, you've got a gig, and I think they really look after you. I think at Channel 7, they pay well, and the circumstances are good.
Okay.
So on that side of the table, I think it's excellent. The production would be really good, and but as a kind of a unit for consumption in the general population, I'm not entirely convinced. My PhD supervisor, his name's Charles Fairchild. When I was doing my work, he published a book called Pirates and Pop Idols, I think, something like that. And I haven't read it. I read bits of the introduction, and it was right at that time that American Idol and Australian Idol were really hitting it big time.
Yep.
And I read a really interesting statistic in Charles's work that the recording industry reached, like the sale of CDs, right, in particular, reached a peak, I don't know if you want to guess the year, in 1995. Trailed off after that. I'm not sure when Napster and all those things started.
Yeah.
But I remember file sharing services being around at that time, and that was like a new frontier.
Mm-hmm.
And at that same time there was the rise of Idol. So the record companies are scrambling to keep the bucks rolling in, because the bucks aren't rolling in like they used to, and they've come up with this ingenious way, and I think this is what social media is predicated on also, is that, you know, you got to ask as the user, who are you working for, all right? So they've set up this multimedia platform where you've got the TV production, which is paid for by the hundreds and thousands of dollars, millions of dollars worth of advertising that the corporations place, you know. And then, you know, you vote by sending an SMS. So there's this instant feedback. It's better than ratings ever were, right? Rating surveys, you know, they're a thing of the past. Now it's all about SMS us or join our mailing list or, you know, whatever kind of interactive model is in place. So they've got a really direct contact with their demographic, you know, the people who are watching these shows. Why are they watching the shows? Because the companies who are advertising on them have spent billions of dollars researching the psychology that's just going to get you right by the short and curlies and reel you in, hook, line and sinker. That's why I threw my TV out in 2000, because I understood that was happening to me. I didn't want that to happen. So the advent of these shows, you know, comes about, and so you realise it's more like KFC than... It's more like KFC is to food than like, you know, some gourmet 5-star chef would offer you.
Yep.
It's product.
Yep.
It's not. Look, there are people who are in that world who are artistic and you know, again, like I mentioned Kate Bush before, like she's made her career out of the record company model, and thank goodness that actually Kate Bush got the luck that her music came out to the world, because to me she is truly an artist. But there is a lot of garbage, and speaking of Idol and all this, when I actually used to sit and watch it with my wife just to get an education, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
To what is this thing that is going on that I was trying to ignore? And she said, come on, watch it. I'm like, okay, I'll watch it. And all the singers getting on there with these covers, and you know, there's this vocal technique called a melisma.
Okay.
You know, where you like, you hear it in the American national anthem. That, you know, it's all the vibrato and all the little appoggiaturas and all this, like, you know, use melisma to kind of decorate the song. It actually doesn't need any decoration. Just sing it straight ahead and it'll be fine. So the same with all these old covers, right, on the voice and those things. So I came up with this term, you know, they're emaciating this song with their melismas, so it's melismaciation. And to me, I don't know if I hear as a parallel, around that same time, like this sort of gospel chops thing opened up. And I've got a lot of respect for people who can play the shit out of the drums, but it's like, gospel chops seems to be a license to just overplay and make it about me.
Yep.
And I'm not into that at all.
Yep.
You know, and so those two things kind of came along in parallel.
Mm.
I don't know. Like it's a corporate marketing exercise more than anything else. I wish the general population would just wake up out of the stupor and realize that they're not interested in the art, or it's you know, it's about like trying to leverage whatever kind of media is available on whatever platform to generate those millions that they're used to making, you know.
Yep.
And always in those things, I'll never understand it, but the payment of the musicians always seems to be comparatively the lowest and the latest in the whole hierarchy of things. It's like the whole fucking reason that it exists is for the music, at least you think it is.
Yeah.
But it's all the people with their fingers in the pies, all the stakeholders.
Yeah, that's right.
Who really, I'll never understand that. I'll never understand it. It's a complex beast. I mean, I've had some dealings with like being on TV and signing contracts with record companies to appear with certain artists and yeah, I'm not sure. I probably can't really say anything about what actually is happening.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. Maybe I can, but I don't want to risk it in case someone hears this and goes, you know, like. But it's just interesting to see, like, lift the hood and to see how the machine actually works.
Yep.
And it is a machine.
Of course.
I didn't get into music for those reasons.
Yep.
I just got into it because I love playing the drums.
Cool.
And you know, but the social media thing is interesting. It's like I guess, you know, Kenny Werner, the pianist, said, you know, it's not music if no one hears it. So, you know, a student once reminded me of something I said to him years ago. I don't remember actually saying it to him, but I remember probably why I would have said it. I said to him, man, if you love music, probably about the worst thing you could do would be to go and become a professional musician, you know. But I see the opposite too. If you love music, then the best thing you can do is to go and be a professional musician. And to me, the fullest experience of what music has to offer is when you get to perform something original to a receptive crowd and you make their day a little better than it was before they arrived at your gig, you know. Art Blakey said it, you're supposed to wash away the dust of everyday life. And occasionally people come up and tell me, just people I've never met, they just happen to be at this gig that I'm playing, but they come up to you at the end and they say, you know, I think one woman said, it's like she was really depressed. It's like she was really not feeling very good. But just we managed to just lift her up out of that. And I'm like, wow, did we do that? That's awesome. That's what, you know. Again, like I listen to that Kate Bush song and I cry. And there's other tracks too that make me cry. But to me, if it makes someone feel like that, then that's the job that I'm in it for.
Yeah.
Because it's not for me. It's for. Like I want to dedicate my learning to the service of the world, you know, because if you can do something just that little bit better, you're taking humanity away from the brink, and we're just teetering perilously close to the edge of the brink. And if I can just help, I mean, I don't know if I ever will, but like, you know, just that little bit back from there, that's why I do what I do, you know. It's because if I make someone else sound good, I sort of automatically sound good, you know, because I'm responding to them sounding good. So that just means getting out of their way, basically. Getting out of the music's way, getting out of your own way. Kenny Werner also said, you know, music works. It's just people who fuck it up.
I think on that note, Dave Goodman, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Stevie.
Bloody awesome chat, man. Thanks so much.
All right.
Cheers, man.